Ever since the genocide began, perpetrated by Israel against the Palestinian people, the world has been turned upside down. This is a point I've made over and over again, which is that those who support the genocide are treated as mainstream and respectable, and those who oppose the genocide are the ones who are targeted, silenced, deplatformed, sacked, arrested, generally persecuted. And here is another striking example. And this is the sort of thing which you shouldn't have to do this thought experiment, but you kind of go, if this happened in Vladimir Putin's Russia, there would just be general outrage and this would be an example of authoritarianism. Well, this didn't happen in Vladimir Putin's Russia. It happened in Britain under Keir Starmer's Labour government, which is the police raiding a Quaker meeting house, which I've been to myself, hosting young people organising against genocide and arresting them. As well as other aspects which we'll talk about. Now, I'm really delighted to be joined by Sam Holland of Youth Demand. That's the movement of activists, young people who've been doing sterling work fighting the genocide being committed with British complicity and facilitation. Sam, great to speak to you. How are you doing?
Yeah, and thank you so much for having us. It's really great to be on the show in the wake of this madness.
Well, can you tell me first, what was the conference? What was it all about?
So in case people don't know, I'll just briefly recap what Youth Demand is.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
We've got two demands of the government. So we're demanding that the government imposes a total trade embargo on Israel, including of weapons. And we're also demanding that the UK government raises £1 trillion by 2030 through taxing the rich and fossil fuel corporations to pay climate damages to the global south. So that's exactly what these young people were speaking about on Thursday. We're speaking about the horrors that we're seeing in the world, how we respond to them as young people, as citizens of the UK. This is exactly what was being discussed when they had a big knock on the door, and the police smashed their way through. It's unbelievable. A place of worship, Westminster Quakers, one of the biggest Quaker meeting houses in London. They smashed down the door, blasted in, arrested all of the 6 people that were in the meeting, including, these are people that are like one person that has never been to a Youth Demand meeting before. They just came because they were interested. They were swept up in this. And also a Telegraph journalist, we believe, an undercover journalist was also swept up in the operation. And four of the 6 people then subsequently had their houses raided overnight. So they came back the next morning to, rooms that had been trashed. And the flatmates that were obviously pretty terrified. And it's not just this. There's been a wider operation, but this is part of the Met have called it Operation Vulcan, ominously. And 7 other people were also arrested in the last, over the last sort of 48-hour period. And most of these people also had their houses raided. It's unbelievable repression on young people that are trying to stand up and fight this genocidal government. And ultimately, what we're saying is we shouldn't be surprised. A government that's willing to sell weapons to a genocidal state will obviously use brute force, whatever it takes to suppress people that are trying to stop them from doing that. And if people want to find out, more about what's happened and get together to discuss how we respond, we're running an emergency response Zoom at 7:00 on Thursday. I think the link will be in the description, with the Quakers to think about how we move from here. What do we do as a movement now?
So do click on the link, which is in the description, and you can take part in that, support that. I mean, were you kind of shocked and surprised by this, or was this, do you think, the kind of ever creeping authoritarianism, the repression of the right to protest specifically, and particularly the right to protest against genocide? I mean, obviously we've seen the mass arrest of people taking part in the protest a few weeks ago on the Saturday. Against the genocide. Those were people laying flowers for slaughtered Palestinian civilians. So what do you think in that kind of broader context?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a shock when it happens, but ultimately we're not surprised. We're not surprised. Because, as I mentioned before, what the key story here, that all that this fits within, is that the government, our government, is directly engaged. We're not just using the word complicit. They're direct participants in this genocide in Gaza. And the story here is that there's a group of young people. That's the story, right? There's the government's enacting a genocide, and a group of young people are desperately trying to stop them. And I think it's always crucial that we bring it back to this, the horror that's being enacted, to really contextualize it. I mean, I'm sure lots of you yourself and your viewers have seen the massacres that have happened during Eid over the last couple of days. Children in tents trying to celebrate with their family in the dire conditions that they're in, while starving, are being blown to pieces. right? Kids that are, wearing the clothes that they've just been given and need, parents have tried to scrape together for them in the poverty they're living in, and they're being blown up to pieces. And they're being blown up with bombs that have been dropped from, British-made planes, right? So that's the context that it happens in. That's what our government's engaged in, and we need, in Youth Demand, we spend a lot of time thinking about how, what's our responsibility in the face of this? How do we respond to our government's crimes? And what is our responsibility to those kids that are in the tents, right, in the heat, having bombs dropping all around them? And what we think is our responsibility, our main responsibility, is to resist, is to fight back and use all the non-violent means that we have at our disposal, including street blockades, blockading infrastructure, bringing London to a standstill, if that's what it takes. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing in April. We're going to be, blockading the streets of London day after day after day until we get a response from our government, until they end their complicity in genocide. And people that are listening to this that are interested, they can sign up at youthdemand.org to take part in these actions and fulfill our responsibility to those kids that are in those tents right now.
And as an example, Britain, of course, exports the crucial components for F-35 jets, which rain death and destruction on the people of Gaza, children, women, men alike. I mean, do you think part of this is to try because rightly what you're doing there is trying to use this as an opportunity to encourage people to get involved? That's the correct response. But I mean, is the fear they're doing this in order to try and intimidate people into not taking part, to make an example of people, and therefore that will, they hope, deter people from taking part in these protests and direct action?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. That's that's exactly what they're trying to do. They are absolutely terrified of what it looks like when the mass movement that's existed for Palestine escalates its actions. They're terrified of that because that's what's ultimately going to force them to change their policy. We need to look, I think, really carefully at this point about what the Palestine movement's done over the last year and a half. What has happened and what can we learn from it? We've obviously seen hundreds of thousands, at its peak, 1 million people marching on the streets of London, which is obviously an important thing to do. We need to have these mass displays of strength. But it's evident now, a year and a half in, that it's not going to force the government to change its policy. We've had minor wins, minor victories. 15% of weapons, that have been stopped. The government has stopped exporting. But that's 15% or 10% even.
It was 8%.
8%. My bad. So that's evidently inadequate, right? We're not going to, the mass marches and the things that have been going on are not enough to stop it from happening. So they're terrified, right? That like even a slither of those people will step up and escalate their actions and move on to doing civil disobedience, civil resistance, which is, exactly what we think needs to happen. And we're not going to be intimidated. So again, we're still going ahead with our April plans. We will still be out on the streets every single day during April. And people can sign up to get involved in that if they think that, if they agree with the analysis that, what's happened so far, the mass marches and the rallies are not going to cut the mustard. We need to engage in disruptive actions, and they can sign up and join us.
I mean, the people who've been arrested, but what's the mood amongst them? They're pretty shaken up by the experience.
Yeah, I mean, people are obviously shaken. It's a very nerve-wracking experience. But these are some of I think really amazing people. That like the people that are willing to do this, the people that I've met doing this work. The people that have the courage to step up and continue going. They're just unbelievable. And that's what we've seen. Like a day after some people got out of jail, they were out leafleting on the streets to still try and make this April campaign happen. We've got people, young people going on BBC Newsnight this evening to, people that were arrested and raided. They're still going ahead and doing everything they can, everything that's in their power, to fulfill their responsibility to those kids in those tents. And that's what that's what we think has to happen. We can't be intimidated. We can't let these acts of repression intimidate us, and we won't. We're going to continue going ahead. So if anything, we thank the Met Police for all the attention you brought on the campaign, for bringing us on the show, for getting us on the front page of the Sunday Times, for getting BBC Newsnight and boosting our action campaign.
And we know how history judges these sorts of incidents, don't we? Where at the time, those fighting against an injustice are, the full weight of the state comes crashing down on them, and how history sees those locking them up or arresting them or raiding their homes, and how those on the receiving end of judges is quite instructive, isn't it?
I think you're bang on here, and I think you're brilliant at doing this with your work, linking what's happening now to the historical context when historic horrific acts have been perpetrated, what do ordinary people do in those situations, and what's looked back on as as being the right thing? And you're totally right. Every single time, it's the people who stood up to resist, the people who stepped beyond just doing conventional actions, from doing the marches, from doing the rallies, and went one step further. The suffragettes, the civil rights movements, the South African anti-apartheid movement, all these historic movements that we like to speak about. It's the people that went up and above, that we remember as being the heroes. Those are the ones that have statues in Parliament Square, Gandhi and the suffragettes, and that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to be in that tradition and step into resistance, which means, as I said before, it means causing disruption. It means bringing business as usual to a halt. It means actually breaking through the narrative, breaking through just daily life in this country to say, look, we're arming a genocide that breaks every single human value we have. And that's what we think we have to do. And again, it's definitely important that people get involved now. We've seen what's happening over the last couple of weeks. Bombing escalating, the ceasefire completely breaking down. Again, I just can't say it enough. We need everyone on the streets to join us. Everyone out in the movement to join us. You can sign up at youthdemand.org and get stuck in.
Great stuff, Sam. And again, massive kudos for your work. It's so important. And whatever fear people may feel about speaking out or doing something about the genocide is nothing compared to the fear that the Palestinian people in Gaza face every single day, knowing that any moment could be their last, and every single day it is the last moment for so many Palestinians, including, of course, little children, including paramedics a few days ago who were sent to rescue wounded people and who were executed one by one and thrown in a mass grave. So the worst imaginable atrocities being committed in full sight of the world. And whilst, we talk about international law, we talk about the law, international law is being systematically violated by the likes of not just Benjamin Netanyahu, but the British government. And if anyone should be having their homes raided at the moment for crimes, it should be those arming a genocide, not those trying to fight it. Please like and subscribe, everyone, and leave comments, because then more people engage. We've got the link to turn up, as Sam said, to support on Thursday the actions. So just click on the link in the video description and do get the message out. Share the video so everyone can hear what Sam said. Let's turn this into a positive, and so we can thank the Met Police. Not something I normally say, but Sam, thank you very much and well done for your work.
Thanks so much for having me, Owen.